Hello and welcome to another Rambling with RamblePak, the first one of 2025, now that we are halfway through the year. I'm joined once again by my buddy Ross, and for the first time we got Oldboy. Oldboy, how would you like to introduce yourself?
What's up, YouTube? I'm just a grumpy fuck that thinks too much about video games.
There you go. Today we're going to be discussing sequels and on a general theme, kind of the paradox of sequels, because it started in some ways in terms of what the audience wants versus what the creator wants from a sequel, but it's also just kind of just the very paradox of a sequel itself, where people want new original ideas. They're tired of seeing the same old thing, and yet, if you ask somebody what they want to see, right? Like unannounced games, like what kind of
Hmm.
an unannounced game do they want to see? Most of what they're going to list are going to be sequels or franchise revivals. So it's one of those interesting things that people are kind of contradictory about, and I wanted to explore different
Yeah,
kinds
I
of
mean,
sequels and stuff.
I kind of get it because it's difficult for them to like. How are you going to say yes? I would love to a new game that doesn't exist yet versus like I would like a game like one of the ones I've played before. So it's kind of an easy trap to fall into, assuming people only want sequels, especially if you're like a major publisher
Well,
and
and
you poll
also,
people about it.
if you ask somebody what their dream game is, it's usually some kind of impossibility because it does
Yeah,
everything. It's literally
yeah, that
everything
too.
in the kitchen sink. I want a niche game that doesn't sell very well, but has the budget of the biggest like triple A, no, quadruple A game. There you go.
Yeah,
Everyone makes fun of the quadruple A term, but that's what everyone really wants a game to be, right? It's like I want Grand Theft Auto, but with Elden Ring mechanics, but with Sony presentation and graphics,
yeah.
and it gets kind of ridiculous.
Well, there's also like an ironic overlap between like people that have never approached video game development on one hand, and then you have like the heads of major companies that decide these things, where it's like, and then make it open world, and the company's like, I will make it open world. I'll take the thing that was an open world and I'll attach a giant superfluous open world to it.
And all of a sudden, you have the most boring entry in the series. But yeah, one of the things that kickstarted this idea was a rewatching of the Back to the Future trilogy, which again it encapsulates that idea where again when you ask somebody why a sequel wasn't very good, it's because the sequel was too much like the first one, or you have when the sequel is too different from the first one. But the Back to the Future series is interesting because it leans into repeating that first movie with a bit of a remix to it. And I found that absolutely fascinating that the even though Back to the Future 2 and 3, I don't think anyone would ever say they're as good as the first one, they're not hated either. Like it's all the trilogy, and it's because 2 and 3 kind of wrap up in that nostalgia element, that nostalgia idea, and then they go and it's like they want to revisit the ideas with a twist. So, okay,
Yeah,
in the first movie, you have Marty McFly escaping Biff around the town. He does the skateboard thing. But then when he's in the future, he's the one out of his element. He's still a fish out of water, but whereas his 1980s skateboarding is his advantage, his strength,
mm,
it's his sort of weakness because he doesn't actually know how the hoverboards work in the future. But then when you get to the Wild West, he's completely at a disadvantage because he's getting dragged around that same street, just it's underdeveloped, it's old west, it's not paved roads, it's
mm.
all dirt. He's getting dragged around tied to a horse kind of a thing. So it's interesting how it's like we're going to have this plot beat, the same
Yeah.
plot beat, but we're going to revise it somehow. So again, it's where they lean into it, but they're also intentionally playing with it. But in regards to video games and stuff, I'm curious. I guess from the get go, what game series or franchise can you think of where both like the second entry is very much like the first?
Mm.
Like it's basically like sort of a patch, like a 2.0 or something, but people like it,
Right.
and then one where the sequel is completely different and people either love it or hate it, kind of a thing.
Oh, I would definitely say Earth Defense Force is the same game like three times, but like incrementally better. And people just want more missions. They're
I
like,
mean,
yeah, it's a couple new enemies and new weapons or whatever, but like mostly it's the same core game, and it has been the same core game since like what 2010 or something.
2007, I think. Like, because
Yeah,
the one on Earth Defense Force 2017, which was a 2006 or 2007 game on the Xbox 360,
right.
and that wasn't even the first entry in the series. That was the
No,
first one we got in the United States.
it goes way back. It goes back to like the PlayStation 1 era, I think.
Maybe I think PlayStation 2.
You're probably right. Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like it, you're right. Like because I played Earth Defense Force 2017. I played the Iron Rain or whatever. That was a Western developed one.
Mhm.
On the 360, and then I haven't played an Earth Defense Force until I started playing 6 with you, and it
Yeah.
feels like the same game.
It's probably the same engine. Like they probably took it all the way along.
Very possibly is, especially because they started making them for the Vita.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've played EDF 5 and 6 now, and from what I've understood from people telling me is that every couple games they reset the universe. They try to do just the same story, but little bits of variation. Like they introduce new enemy types, maybe a new class, but mostly new weapons, and it's the same sandbox. It's the same elements, but they just change it up in some way, and usually for the bigger and the more ridiculous. Especially 5 and 6 gets really ridiculous.
It's like the alternate universe version of like a not a subscription model, but like a games as a service thing, which I hate to say, but like it's the good version of that, because you get a game every like 3 years or something that's incrementally different, and there's a time like where you're done with the previous one. You're like, yeah, I don't need to play like 100 more missions of EDF for a while, but then by the time the next game comes out, everybody wants to play more, and it's got changes to everything. Got balance changes. It's got new class probably. Or if it hasn't got a new class, it's got an old class with like a new suite of weapons,
And
new
that's
vehicle,
Yeah,
type, whatever.
5 to 6 did a lot of things to try to change up what each of the classes do by like. For me, I played Air Raider in 6, so instead of all bombers, you have drones.
Yeah.
And you have new situations where you can't call in your bombers, or then you're suddenly in a post-apocalyptic scenario where you don't have all these batteries available for you to, rain hellfire down. So it's they kept playing with the idea and pulling it in different directions. So it fits into the bigger and better kind of approach.
Yeah, and it's funny because the first example that came to my mind was actually Gears of War 1 to 2. Because to me, Gears of War 2 is Gears of War 1, but with incremental improvement. Like, everything about the game feels the same, just a bit more refined. You get a few more weapons. They put more emphasis on the set pieces. But Gears of War 1 and 2 are almost, like, you could literally package them as the same game in the end. Like, you could basically have just one executable file that you finish the last mission of the first game, then you jump right into Gears of War 2, and it would feel like very little changed. And similarly, you have the Yakuza series, which is somewhere in between because the combat does change throughout the franchise. But granted, I'm coming in as somebody that started with Yakuza 0. So then you go back and you play the PS3 games, 3, 4, and I think 5 is the next one I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels so much more jank. So it's like going from where it evolved a bit to then going back. But for the most part, this is a game where I've mentioned before, it can get away with so much asset reuse, and people just like they don't care. They're willing to spend the $60 to now $70 for a new Like a Dragon game, even though it's been using for over half a decade now the same general. Actually, probably. I think some of the enemy animations and character animations are the same since the PS3.
Oh, yeah.
So like some of these weird like where the gangsters are kind of just hunched over and they're swinging their hand like come on fight, like that kind of a thing.
Right.
Like the same exact animations that they were running on the PS3, and nobody cares.
This reminds me of Mass Effect, where some of the like angrily pointing and conversation animations, I'm like, wait a minute, those go back to like the fist-handed models from Neverwinter Nights 1.
Really?
Like they're ancient. Yeah, they've been in BioWare's like library for all that time. Just the animation rig.
That's funny because I know exactly what point you're talking about. Yeah, the sort of
Yeah,
like
where they're
shift
like,
on your, shifting the weight, pointing, that kind of a
Yes.
thing. Like,
That one.
oh my goodness, yeah.
It's
Go
so
ahead.
it's I've played pretty much every Yakuza from 0 all the way up to the only one I haven't played at this point is the Majima Pirate version. Between Yakuza and EDF, and there's another series that I'm partially familiar with called the Trails of series, and all of these, what they appear to focus on from both the creator side and in call to the audience, what both sides expect is an iterative episodic process where some of the mechanics will change to keep up the novelty, but what both the creator and the audience are kind of focused upon is the story of the characters and of the world and how that pushes forward. Now, each one does different degrees of keeping to that and swapping things up, but with Yakuza in particular, I mean, the cities that you go to are just as much character as Kiryu is, or Majima. And then, at least for me, one of the biggest parts is it's like a soap opera, or a long running TV show, or something like that. It get to track their progress over time and just see
Yeah.
what shenanigans these characters get up to and how they change, or in my case, a couple times, change in ways that I don't agree with, or things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a difference in how these studios are focused upon the iterative process rather than something or revolutionary. Changing the story, changing the characters, changing everything completely. It's they're focused on a lot of times through financial constraints, especially in the case of Falcom. It's like we need another game to keep the company going.
Yeah.
We know what our audience likes, and we cater to that and change up just enough to hopefully keep the series and the company moving forward.
Here's a funny thought. How many of those games are Japanese? Because
all of them. Like,
yeah, because I was thinking about it and I was like, so to have that kind of continuity across your game series, you need a long-term team that's committed to staying at that company and not changing too much over time, with like a director that's been the same director since like whenever. I mean, like, you can change out staff incrementally as the series goes along, and that might sort of reflect how it shifts, but like, I've never seen a studio keep a project alive like that for so long in Western AAA. I don't think ever.
Yeah,
Like, you look at something like Mass Effect, and it's even its own direct sequel a couple years later is wildly different from the first game.
yeah, and you can even look at the changes in the Dragon Age teams, right? And 'cause,
Right.
like, people will point out some of the consistent writers at BioWare, but I feel like the people that were responsible for the first Mass Effect and the first Dragon Age Origins, I'm just talking about the doctors either. I'm talking like
Yeah.
creative writers
Yeah,
and
the
leads and
people
stuff.
you don't
they,
see.
They weren't involved in the sequels. Like,
Yeah. It's the people you don't necessarily see headlining the thing. It's like there might be, a whole team of writers that just went to a different project in between because of management, and they were like, yeah, bring them on for Aspect 2. They're like, oh, they're busy? I guess we'll get somebody else then. So suddenly the whole core of the game changes without anybody knowing. You won't even have the same director, but
Yeah.
a whole different team, right?
and that's the thing. Like, I remember, because you and me, Ross, have the background with Seamus Young, and I remember Seamus talking about the DLC of Mass Effect 3, I believe.
Oh, yeah, true.
And
Yeah.
seeing some of and while like there were great moments, like the Grunt story, because that's the thing, it was mostly like a bunch of fun little things, and Grunt telling the story. It's like a bunch of vets at the VFW telling old stories about the crap you got, the trouble you got into when you weren't in combat, right? But then you also had like the moment where what is it like the woman pulls out like a toothbrush or some crap like that, and it's some
Yeah.
awful kind of comedy or attempt at comedy, and
Right, they keep referencing her special toothbrush, and it's like, yeah, you talked about that, but like we don't care that much about it.
and I can't help but wonder how many of the people responsible for writing that moment, that toothbrush moment, were then the ones in charge of Mass Effect Andromeda. Like
Right,
some of the staff stuff is really hard to follow, but when you take that feel, that idea, it's like, is it the same people? And therefore you have like, okay, sure, yeah, these people did do writing where for the Mass Effect mainline games, but they weren't
right.
the ones that did the good stuff.
They were like a
Like,
junior like narrative designer at the time, and then they stuck through to the next games, and then there was nobody else around, so they were like the most senior person around, and management was like, you'll be the lead.
yes,
You will define all the quests from here on.
and then Andromeda happens.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's indicative that when we want to talk about what a consumer wants from a sequel, what a creator wants from a sequel, there's always that third party looming over both. What do the money men want from a sequel?
Mhm.
And
The
they just
money
want more
men,
money.
the directors of the studio. Yeah, they're looking for profit, and they're looking for stability and expansion. And a lot of times it's not even just a ship of Theseus, it's a whole damn fleet that changes in this
Right.
mercenary culture in a lot of like Western big name studios.
Yeah.
And it
once
just
changes,
it doesn't work for continuity.
you can't put it back either. Like if you wait like 3
Yeah,
or 4
you can't
years,
put
like, once
you can't
Yeah.
put Humpty back together.
Yeah,
You're not like sending out like detectives to go and find each individual person that was on the original team and like bring them back like it's a movie, right? Like someone's just going to go, yeah, we'll get a new team and they'll study the old game, and like how thoroughly they study it is completely up in the air. And even if they were great at it, they're still different people, so it's going to feel different in some way. You need to like make that sequel within 1 or 2 years, probably.
and it's interesting because even when it comes to something like Hollywood, right? Like you can look back at some older movies and you'll find like it's not just a director. A director will consistently have the same
Mhm.
cinematographer, director of photography. They'll have the same like
Mm-hmm.
audio guy. You will find that some of your favorite movies, like oh sure they're made by the same director, but then there's so many other people that help define that look, and over
Yeah.
time it ends up being lost. Or you will find certain directors will also really like working with certain writers and screenwriters. Steven Spielberg, I know, worked on a few movies with David Cope. He's a screenwriter that you'll see his name attached to a lot of big projects. I don't think he's great, but it's like his name's on Jurassic Park. The script that he made for Spider-Man isn't the script that we got. We very much got Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but he's still credited. And then you have him working with Steven Spielberg again on War of the Worlds, kind of a thing, right? So in the games industry these days, you don't get that as much. You don't have that same like, all right, I might be the game director, but I'm going to go and assemble this team that I made this game with. So you're going to get some of those same traits. It's more, my understanding at least is it's more corporate in its structure. It's handled like how
Mm.
you would, you know, promote from within a typical corporate structure, whereas Hollywood the
Yeah,
roles
there's
are
a lot
very
of
differently defined.
pitches, a lot of gates where you like go into a review and then people higher up take a look and they have like opinions and it gets signed off on or not. You're basically it's like Shark Tank actually.
Mm.
A
And
little less mercenary, but not only by so much.
but that's also again when you bring up we just brought up three different Japanese games, and while the Yakuza series doesn't have the original creator and probably some other staff on it anymore. Like we know the original creator, I can never remember his name. He's
Nagashi.
yes, he's gone.
Mm.
They
But
do still have the same writer, not the writer for the first two games, I believe, but the guy who's kind of been writing the majority of the franchise at this point is still there. I
and
forget
that's
his name,
the
but
thing. You probably still have a lot of people, a lot of those staff, and this is because in Japanese culture, it's a lot more uncommon to leave a company. It's becoming a little bit more common these days. My understanding is, but
Yeah.
like we're talking about a nation where it's like you get hired at a company and you're there for life. That's the cultural understanding that is starting to change.
Yeah, you're the salary man.
But it's not like an overnight change. Like we are seeing, more and more as more game studios, especially, start to get closed and stuff like that. You are seeing leadership start to move to different studios. I mean, what we're seeing with Hideki Kamiya, right? Hideki Kamiya, that was a Capcom developer that then headed up a internal Capcom studio that then founded his own studio and now has gone and founded yet another studio.
Right.
That is incredibly uncommon compared to in the USA. Like, it feels like that's constant. Like, that stuff happens all the time.
There's like a life cycle of like devs get fed up working under an exploitative like publisher that just treats them horribly, and they're like, okay, we gotta get up under this. We gotta make our own great games, and they like make half a game with funding from somewhere, and then they're like, you know what, we can sign on with another soulless publisher and make the next game, and then they make like one more, and that the publisher is like, yeah, I like that game, but what if it just failed for no reason by our own hand, so we could promote something else? And then the cycle repeats as all the devs leave that ship onto some other new studio, and they make another cool hot project, and then they're like, we need money, so what if we found a third publisher, or perhaps one of the first two again?
Do you know how many people probably wish they were Ken Levine? Because how long has he been making Judas for?
Oh yeah, true.
Like, how long has he been working and not shipped a game? Like, I'm just realizing this. Like, it's almost like Jade Raymond. It's almost like Jade Raymond, and she's a producer. And it's funny because she still makes headlines. It's like Jade Raymond, the producer of Assassin's Creed. And it's
Assassin's Creed.
First one. Like,
the very
almost
first.
20 years ago now. She hasn't shipped a game since then. Why do we care who she is now? She hasn't proved, like, all she's proven is she gets hired by people that then never ship something.
Yeah, she gets hired on like the recognition of that game joins to like something like Google Stadia, I believe, at one point.
Google Stadia, then Amazon Games. I forget who the recent one she left was.
She's like the whisperer for projects that like don't quite finish, so she can like go to the next one before that one's done.
I will say though, for Ken, he's traded more than he has on Judas, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's that game might make or break the rest of his career.
That's 3 or 4 baskets of eggs. I'm just saying.
And it is a shame too, because then again, like almost every year, I reread Masters of Doom just because it's a really good read. But at the same time, you're talking about like a lot of these guys that started as a small studio, like where it's just 5 guys and you can make $1 million seller, and how everything collapsed. But poor John Romero, ever since then, and I know it's probably weird to people to say poor John Romero, right? But it's like the dude has been humbled since Daikatana. And even now, like he had a decent studio with Romero Games. They put out Empire of Sin, not the greatest game, but he wasn't promising it's going to make you his bitch, right? Like, so you have this decent game that came out, people liked it, and then he got allegedly picked up by Microsoft, and then like for no reason, Microsoft was just like, "Nah, we're not doing that."
Right.
And now it's like, okay, this time the guy didn't really do anything wrong, though, unless believing Microsoft would really have your back was the mistake, which kind of was, now that I think about it.
Well, there's a couple tens of thousands of people that might agree with that sentiment right now.
Well,
Yeah.
I can definitely speak to the fact that like a couple years ago, the idea was, well, Microsoft makes so much money, you couldn't find more stable employment because they always have the cash. It's like, clearly, that's no guarantee that they won't just can you the next day.
And then tell you it's a sign of success.
Look better on a shareholder meeting. Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow they'll tell you it's a sign of success.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe how tone deaf that. No, oh my goodness. But no, back on topic though. So let's talk about the games that were incredibly different, or at least different enough. Like again, like I'm thinking specifically of oh boy, a guy you and I know very well when it comes to Darksiders 2 and Darksiders 3 even. Because Darksiders 1, a lot of people played and they were like, oh cool, it's a Zelda-like. And then Darksiders 2 changes just enough that it's clearly not a Zelda-like. It's a bit more Diablo loot. It's really driven by the rule of threes in everything. And they just focused on having more game. But it's also a better combat system overall and has some good improvements over the first game. It's just because the structure is different, because it's no longer like a Zelda game. Some people love it, some people hate it. Now, can you think of a game where it's like the sequel did have enough of that spirit in there, but people rejected it because it was too different?
Well, when people reject it, that's
rejected it mechanically. First thought that kind of comes up is the more modern Monster Hunter titles. The, shall we say, argument between those that appreciated the older, more deliberate, and some would say clunk versus the more action-oriented, loosey-goosey, more forgiving styles of the modern ones. But I don't think that's quite the same, because Darksiders interesting because they just said, we have the same continuity of story, but we're doing something completely different. And I think it works for them because they have a whole different protagonist in each video game that they do. And so that kind of helps, at least for me, to conceptualize. It's like, we want to characterize the game around the character in a way. And I can appreciate it that there are series that the creators are like, we did that kind of game. We could make the same game again, but fuck it, we want to try something different now.
And that's the funny thing too, because it's not incredibly different from Darksiders 1 to 2. I think 3 is maybe the most different because they take that Souls-like shift. But at the same time, 3 feels closer to the first one in a lot of ways. Because
or Genesis, which goes completely...
Yeah, Genesis is just top-down shooter melee kind of twin-stick game.
Right.
But I think what's also very... Well, on a personal note, what I find funny is they made the third game with Fury the Souls-like, where you got to take combat a bit more like carefully. But Fury is the hothead that approaches everything as straightforward as possible. So maybe the idea was, okay, the player has to learn how to be smart, and that's reflective of the character's growth themselves. But I don't know. I do find it funny though, because the gameplay
same studio that made Sifu, or is Sifu totally different?
No, Sifu.
Okay, so just conceptually very
different.
Yeah, it was originally Vigil Games, who then, because of THQ collapsing, they did not get anything bought up because they had just shipped a game, and people only wanted to buy games that were almost ready for release. So Vigil Studios closed. And split into Gunfire Games and Airship Syndicate. But actually, one of the you actually mentioned Oldboy. I guess this is also a sort of just transformation over time. Is Doom 2016 and onward, and God of War, where you have the new God of War, is very different from the hack and slash.
Yeah, it's almost it's the same studio name, but it has been long enough that I imagine in both studios, if I looked hard enough, you could find enough of the lower level people have changed around. Like Doom 16, I think still had Carmack involved, but no, Romero, you have Marty and Hugo on top. And in the case of God of War, there was always a bit of a mercenary approach to the directors. So you have Corey back, but it's
the Last of Us type of games, or what's it called?
Well, that's the thing. That could be a combination of things. Like, did Corey want to do a completely different kind of game? Did Sony themselves say, you need to make this more like this kind of a game?
I think that there is the high chance of both cases being there, because it's been a while, but I do recall something about Corey talking about being a dad, and that was a big part of what he was thinking about going with God of War, and kind of changing where Kratos had been to where he is now, because it's a very different Kratos. It's not TC Carson anymore. It's Chris Judge.
Yes.
So both of those cases, the revival of a series, and they say it's a sequel, but they take the numbers out, and and later on they play with that a little bit more. But it is interesting to see how different groups approach reintroducing a series, whereas Doom did a lot more just we have the straight graphical upgrade, but you still have the feeling of you move super fast, you're doing lots of damage, and they add in glory kills and things like that to up the visceral factor to kind of emulate how people felt, just flying around at Mach speed in the old games, compared to God of War, which there are moments that approach the level of brutality in the fighting, but it's a lot more pensive, contemplative, and thinking about legacy rather than just, tearing the head off of a legacy.
Well, it's interesting, too, with God of War 2016 because, actually, yeah, they both released in 2016, didn't they? With God of War, if you go through the game straightforward, none of the optional content, then the most you get is some of the boss fights. Try and emulate that cinematic flair of the quick time events. But when it comes to the combat doesn't really feel that good or that in-depth for a lot of the main story content. But then when you get to the optional fights of the Valkyries, God of War 2016, the Valkyries are the best part of that game. But if you compare what the fights with them is like the mechanical approach, and then compared to the original God of War for PS2 and PS3, it is spiritually a very different approach. It's like Halo Combat Evolved versus original Doom, right? It's like Quake versus Halo kind of a thing, or maybe even Quake versus Call of Duty. You're not approaching the like they're both like first person shooters, but your approach is very different. The mentality you have is very different, and the same goes for the old God of War with the new God of War. And I do like the combat of the new God of War when it works, right? When you're fighting the Valkyries in the first one, when you're in some of the better fights in Ragnarok. But at the same time, there's other elements that they throw in that the original games were just purely about skill and technical ability, whereas now you also have colored loot that helps factor in the difficulty, and it's...
There's also, well, I don't know if they actually changed because I never played too many of the original God of War games, but like, there's the introduction of, well, what if the player gets confused by our simple instructions? We should tell them.
God.
We should very much tell them right now.
Yeah.
It's like, what if they already know? Well, don't worry about it. We'll tell them again.
The worst part of Ragnarok, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely apart from a change that went from God of War, the new God of War 2 Ragnarok is it's one of the things I try to identify in what the audience wants from a sequel, and a lot of times what people want is quality of life, which means holding hands. And it can be interesting how creatives can go way too far. Probably, I would say not even on the creative. That's something more on the publisher side. It's like, we are not letting anyone, no child left behind. No man-child left behind.
Well, I think that does come from the dev team, but it's because they're so used to like the maximal amount of approachability, and because they have to pitch their game to people that don't play video games, to be honest, half the time. I
will agree to that.
It goes through that cycle, and those people have like complaints like, well, I didn't fully understand it. And it's like, it'll be the same commentary until the game is bulletproof. Like literally anybody possible could play it and feel good about themselves. And the other thing, of course, is when it gets to the QA, the, what do they call them? Like market testing, that kind of thing. It goes through batches of people with different backgrounds, and they can select like, they've played a game in the genre before, they've played the sequel, the prequel to this game, or they've never played video games before. They can pick their audience. But even often when they pick like people that supposedly play the same genre, there's a lot of people that might have played one or two games in it, and they can be confused by all kinds of incredible things that you would assume wouldn't confuse anybody at all. And that feedback, depending on the company, can become like a JIRA that someone has to solve. And they'll be past it, and they'll have to have a solution that they can submit along with their JIRA. Otherwise, it'll be like, well, why didn't you fix it? Because it's not really a bug, it's a design issue. But like, player got lost for 10 minutes not reading the sign directly in front of them that was flashing colors. They're like, why didn't they find it out? Maybe the sign should follow their camera. Maybe it should be stuck to their head until they read it.
This is funny because I have done some focus testing for a pretty big company at one point, and without getting into too much detail, there is this one section of the game where there's this creature, and I'm in a locked room with this creature, and I keep trying to fight it because it looked like I was doing damage to it.
Right.
But I found out after the fact that you're not supposed to fight it. It's invincible, and you're supposed to escape from the room instead. And so there is moments where, I've played plenty of games where it's run away from the creature, but the way how it was presented in the moment, and in this, it was a very work in progress kind of build that we were looking at the time. So yeah, it is possible. I played plenty of games, and I sat there and I was like, "No, I'll take care of this."
Yeah, there was like one game, I think it was The Walking Dead, where you had to progress to actually go to the next scene and not just be killed. You had to point an empty gun at an enemy and shoot it 3 times with bullets not coming out, and that was a horrible idea. Because anyone who's played a shooter before,
wild, yeah.
If they shoot once, maybe you can get them to do that, maybe. But if they go, gun has no bullets, what if they just stop trying to shoot the empty gun, right?
Yeah.
That was a
hopefully it's a revolver, but that's goofy.
It was a revolver, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that is asking a lot of people.
What amuses me too, just thinking about like you bringing up the Jira tickets, is like a modern day solution being like 20 Jira tickets closed and left with a comment, added yellow paint.
Right.
Because, I mean, and that's the thing, like, why do you see yellow paint? That's one of the reasons. But that's a whole other topic, because I don't hate yellow paint like so many other people do.
Right. I mean, I've seen some mystifying things. I've seen players, like, look at the way forward that's lit up and be like, I don't know where to go. And they turn around like 180 degrees and they walk the other way and they're like, there's no path here. And they walk back to the place that you just saw and they look forwards across like a bridge with lights and everything. And they're like, it doesn't look like I can get over there. And you're like, what don't they see? What reality do they inhabit that I'm not in? It's right over there. And they like walk around the whole thing. They carefully explore everything except right ahead.
And it's funny because it sounds like the opposite for where I will see something clearly lit up and be like, okay, I had to explore everything else in case there's an item somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then I get angry when there's no item. Because it's like, well, what the heck is the rest of this level for?
There's those people that they spot the one thing that's wrong and they fixate on that. They're like, this must be the solution. I must be able to jump 10 meters across this gap. There's some way I can go up in the pipe over here. I can like swing on the ceiling. And you're like, there's a door to the right. It's right there. and they're, yeah, at least they're thinking.
Reduced luster of pipe on ceiling. So
for sure. For sure.
It's definitely a challenge for the devs because as gaming goes on and more people not only join the consumer base but plays more of a dev's contemporary titles, each time it creates this gestalt of what each player knows about video games and attempts to bring that into every other game. I know I've done that before. It's like, I can jump here in this game. Why can't I jump here? Kind of like what you were talking about. And so a lot of times a major challenge I see is even if the devs don't want to, they have to contend with what do gamers expect and know in the zeitgeist. Yeah. And that's why I hear a lot of times devs just talking about it's like, I'm not even really playing through an entire thing. I'm just sampling everything that's out there to kind of get an idea of where people are right now.
Right.
Yeah. And I can see that too. Cause again, you'll have people it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you will unironically get somebody go back to an old game like Left 4 Dead. And they are completely baffled that there's no like weeklies or dailies or anything to build. And it's like, how did a bunch of boomers just play this game everywhere? And it's like, because it was fun.
Why do I not have aim down the sight?
Oh my god! Did I ever tell the story about the placebo aim down sights?
You told me about it, but you can go ahead and repeat it.
That we had the same commentary back in like 2008 when I was working on Firearm Source, and it was like an adaptation of a mod for Half-Life 1 for Source. And in the original mod, you didn't have aim down sights for guns because it was like pointless. You're playing a shooter, you would just use the crosshairs. That was the convention at the time. And this was like, at the time, it was like, man, wow, you can play a game focused on like a modern day military. This was fresh and new because like the game, like Half-Life was nothing like that. Even Counter-Strike, which was contemporary to it, was like counterterrorism stuff. It wasn't really like, well, you have like all these military weapons, you can go prone, you can parachute. Firearms was kind of, in many ways, the predecessor to Battlefield, and some of the team from Firearms got hired to work at DICE on Battlefield. So the continuity is there. So we got to Source, and suddenly everybody, like an outrageous number of people were like, Iron Sights, Iron Sights, Iron Sights. I love Iron Sights. Must have Iron Sights.
So
and
then after Call of Duty Modern Warfare especially.
Exactly. And they vociferously demanded Iron Sights, and plenty of them were like, I won't even play the game without Iron Sights. I don't know what they're doing. So we put in Iron Sights, but the argument was like, well, it changes the gameplay. It's quality of life. I just like it. So we added Iron Sights, but in the most like passive aggressive way we could, which was, okay, well, you get Iron Sights. They won't affect your accuracy. They'll slow you down 20%. They'll zoom you in 10%. And people were like, incredible change. The whole nature of the gameplay is different. Everything has been altered.
Oh, man.
10 out of 10, I'll buy the game now. And all those complaints stopped overnight, and not a single person ever went, these Iron Sights don't actually do anything. It's just a vibe.
Oh, that's
Yep.
hilarious and depressing. Good Lord, we haven't gotten much better.
Yeah, and you could still move around at top speed. You could, you could dive to prone Iron Sighting if you wanted, I guess. But the gun on the screen in your face covering half your target, you can have that. That's yours.
And that's the thing. Like, in a game like Call of Duty, I believe they do have it impact your accuracy, but it is one of those things where it's like, okay, and that's the thing, for Call of Duty, it was supposed to be part of the authenticity to it, right? Like, they didn't want to go for realism, they wanted to go for authenticity. That was a very early interview I remember reading after Modern Warfare, because that's how they justified the blockbuster stuff. It's like, if you want it to be realistic, it's going to be very boring. Or it's going to be full spectrum warrior, right? Like, you're going to have a very, very different kind of play style. But they still want to make sure, like, people walk correctly while holding their firearm correctly. The firearms themselves are, well, I was going to say accurate, but they're really not. I mean, shotguns in video games are never correct to real life.
But they look
if they were correct, it'd be too powerful for most cases.
I mean, it's bad enough in Gears of War.
Oh, that poor Nasher. Good Lord. Good for 2 inches.
And yet it'll wreck you at that 2 inch.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Even with the limitation, it's so many games, the shotguns are the meta. Even with it being nerfed so hard.
Yep.
If you can get within sneezing distance, they're done.
Yep.
But that's kind of the interesting thing, too, because then you also see, I think one of the most interesting eras is, though, when you were seeing game genres go from 2D to 3D. And Nintendo was probably the best at making this shift, at taking the spirit of something from the 2-dimensional into the 3-dimensional, even though every one of them changed. Like, the biggest shift you could see in Mario Brothers and then in Legend of Zelda, and that it slowed the game down. If you go play, because that's the thing, like, if you play Ocarina of Time, it'll be like, oh man, this really is like A Link to the Past, but in 3D. But then you go play A Link to the Past, and it is so much more quick in combat, it's so much more quick in exploration, even puzzle solving, and what you can, like, where you can hide things too. Ocarina of Time, just by being nature of 3D, and again, when you go back to Ocarina of Time, if you really think about your first time playing that, or actually that's the thing too, because there's now enough people that even if they're, say, mid-30s, Ocarina of Time might have been one of their first video games. So to me, Ocarina of Time, like, that first Deku Tree dungeon really did try and get you to understand navigating a game world in 3D. And now people just, you start games in a 3D environment and world. You don't have to figure out how to, like, no more than usual, you don't have to figure out the controller in a way that you're used to. But
you have that extra verticality off the bat, which definitely slows things down. I'm actually, like, when you mention that, I'm kind of impressed how many games made good use of that off the jump. Like, all the platformers got it right away. I guess because they were already
Not all of
like
them.
you could fall off of stuff. Oh, true. Quite a few platformers were pretty jank, but
I mean, that's Bubsy 3D, but that's also the funny thing too is a lot of developers made side scrolls. Like the original Gex was for Sega Saturn, it was for the original PlayStation, and it was a side scrolling game that still used sprites. It was more like Donkey Kong Country in that it was like the 3D image bitmapped into a sprite.
yeah.
It wasn't until Mario 64 that everyone was like, "Oh, now we can do this in 3D." But
This is what 3D means. It's not just an art style. It's like you can turn the camera.
and the interesting thing about that as well is Metal Gear Solid, when you play that first game, is barely a 3D game. It takes the original old 8-bit top-down design, and that's the majority of how you play that game. The 3D was more meant for presentation and certain other ideas, but otherwise it was actually like Hideo Kojima just kept the 2D design and brought it into a more complex era. Yeah, and I think that's actually kind of fascinating to look at because then it wouldn't be until Metal Gear Solid 2 he'd start to really break out from that. And then I feel like the Phantom Pain is where he was full-blown completely something different. No,
And we still have
Snake Eater. Snake Eater probably made the biggest shift just because the environment was completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I played 1, a bit of 2, and then Revengeance. If you're wondering my my spread of Metal Gear games.
Yeah, unfortunately,
with not owning a PlayStation.
I've played 1, 3, and Acid, so I'm also pretty barren on MGS experience, unfortunately.
I've watched a heck of a lot more of Metal Gear Solid criticism and breakdown than I've actually played the games myself. I think the first one is the only one I've ever beaten. But it is a fascinating series nonetheless. And I definitely never played 4 because by the time I got a PS3, I didn't bother with Metal Gear Solid 4. But no.
Is 3 on PC now?
3?
It will be the remaster, whatever they're doing with it, is coming out soon.
Wow.
I don't remember if the collection they just released has 3 on it, but it might. Because the big one people are looking for is 4. People are looking for like the collection part 2, because 4 is locked to PlayStation 3 and it has never been ported outside of that.
Right.
I think remakes of particular games is an interesting situation to talk about in terms of sequels, in that it's more of a meta sequel. You know, it's like the remake projects for Resident Evil, or what they've been doing with Final Fantasy VII, which is much more directly a sequel thing. Yeah, and we're not talking about what we think of them. It's just the approach of doing it. It's let's calm down. Trust me. It's like
it'll be a completely different podcast.
I can make much bigger noises about both of those in certain cases, but or maybe one that's more palatable. From what I've heard, the System Shock remake that Night Dive did.
Right.
In all these cases, it becomes an interesting perspective on, because not only a lot of times it's a completely different dev group. I mean, in case of Night Dive, they got a lot of help and consultation from the original devs, from what I understand. But in the case of like Capcom, it's Mikami was there for the remake of 1, but he wasn't there for what they were doing with 2, 3, 4, and Capcom didn't even have Capcom working on the first iteration of the 3 make. So it becomes an interesting look at what audiences want, from a revival of a particular title, even more so than something like old school Doom to Doom 2016.
Yeah,
just for me, it's an interesting situation because there's a lot of cases of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and in a lot of scenarios, what I see happening is that they try to give as much, little biscuits of, it's, hey, look, we have the same voice lines, we might have the same voice actor, we have this little moment from the original game, but we're doing something very different for a new audience, and so people from 20 years ago might feel left behind.
And it's a
Right.
shame too because there's room where a remake can be done well. I actually really like the Dead Space remake, for example. I think the Dead
That's
Space
another
remake
example. Yeah.
is along the lines of that original Resident Evil remake, where the Resident Evil 1 remake is in most ways an improvement over the original. Does it replace the original? I think that's a question because I never played the original PlayStation game until it was released on Good Old Games. And it's still fun. I still had a lot of fun going through the original Resident Evil, all those simple polygons and all. But there's something about Resident Evil Remake that there's definitely more polish. The visuals, of course, are better, but also they made enough additions to the story. So does it replace the original? I'm not sure. It could. And that's the same with Dead Space. The Dead Space remake could replace the original game, if only just because now the world is interconnected. You don't have separate levels. And it's interesting to me because I feel like if any game released over the past 15 or so years or 20 years could use a similar remake, it's probably the original BioShock because one, that combat is really rough to go back to. But also, the last time I went back to BioShock was maybe 5 years. I think it was during COVID. I went back and started playing it on the remaster, and I felt like the game could be so much better if it was given more of a Metroidvania redesign.
Yeah,
If-
it did feel like it should be more open than it actually was, and it wasn't
Yeah.
totally unopen, but like it doesn't hold a candle to anything that Looking Glass made, right?
Well, it's not
Which-
even just that. It's the fact that once again, like everything's kind of an individual level. You can, like, it's not as outlined as Dead Space, I think, but
Was BioShock an Xbox 360 game?
it was.
Yeah.
So like it was among the very first of the generation, if I remember then, and it had memory limitations like crazy.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was
Why
2007,
everything had to
2008.
be segmented. Yeah.
Yep.
And I bring this up because every time they make an immersive sim like remake, it's wild. It's like a curse. It comes out at the cusp of a new console generation. Every single time they go with the previous generation of consoles, so they have the maximum possible memory limitations, and their like open world,
Yeah.
their open environment exploration game is always confined to tiny little bite-sized chunks with like I'm gonna squeeze through a little crack to get between two distinct areas while we load in the next one every time, and it takes like 10 seconds, and it's like this is totally different from the source material, and you could have just made bigger areas if you made them less less visually expensive, right? Less detail out there.
You know
Could have
what?
been done quite easily.
Oh no! I just realized if you put me, if in a magical alternate universe where I was put in charge of a BioShock remake, people would hate me. Like all the immersive sim people would hate me because
Right.
again, like where does my mind go? That you can make Rapture into a Metroidvania. So instead
Right.
of you can pick and choose your plasmids. It's like you don't get to
Right.
pick and choose your plasmids. You find the different plasmids and they unlock different doors and areas.
You find
throughout Rapture.
all the plasmids.
It's
Oh
like,
man,
I'm going to make
Yeah,
it a Metroidvania, and immersive sim fans would hate me.
I already kind of hate you for that. That's not what BioShock is.
But that's because BioShock needs a remake.
And at the very end, you become the ultimate plasmid golem, and you end up fighting another one. It's poetry.
That's true because at the same time, I'm not even thinking of the choices element because the whole binary morality is so pointless and dumb.
Right.
Like, there's no
Yeah, that
no
really
reason
was,
to
like,
be evil. And they even
Stomp on the basket full of puppies or save them. Which will you do?
Well, it's not even
a
that.
complex moral decision.
it's like what
Well,
do you-
it was more they didn't have the balls to see the consequences through because if
Yeah.
you save them, you get a gift that is like even more
Yeah.
than if you had lost them all, and all you get is a cutscene at the very end. It's,
yeah, because if
Which is-
you save them all, you ultimately get more Atom than if you were to
Right.
harvest them. And the thing is, even the act of harvesting, if you choose to save them, they react like a little kid would, like no.
Right.
But then if you choose to harvest them, they're like they're
like, "Rah."
and it's like a little monster child. So it's like, all right, you ain't even human no more. I'm
Right,
it's a mercy kill. So it's
How
like,
do we feel about Dishonored doing the same thing in reverse? Don't kill
Oh.
anybody in our assassin game. That's the morally correct path. And if you kill like too many people, we'll judge you. We'll judge you harshly. Everybody in the game will judge you, and nothing will go well.
All of these morality things, like, and that's the thing. If you simply took away the morality angle, like, by killing people, therefore, the princess is going to be.
If it was chaos or order or something.
Yeah, like if it was somehow interpreted different, because I don't mind the idea that the more people you kill, the more rats it attracts.
No, that's
especially because
cool.
there's a supernatural element to it.
Yeah.
But that all of a sudden this little empress girl is going to become this horrible person.
If she became like more pragmatic and like cold-hearted and just followed your example without being evil for no reason or mean or toxic to everyone around her, like those things don't necessarily follow on, but I'm just going to go kill some people that were my enemies anyway. I'll just kill more of them because I'm angry.
And especially because, again, the order system, again, if you're going to spare people, usually it's a hell on earth scenario for them. Like,
yeah, it's true. What you do is actually morally worse most times if you spare them than if you killed them.
Or at least
because they're like sold into slavery or something. Yeah,
we've digressed quite a bit though. But
yeah, that's true.
Well, I think I can kind of tie it back in because I'm not sure how contemporary Mass Effect and BioShock were to each other. I feel like they both came out relatively early in the
2007,
360.
2008.
So relatively in the same time frame, people were trying to find a way to bring the morality systems from something like old school CRPGs. I'm thinking like Fallout, Planescape, where there's a lot of shades of gray and maybe, one, full renegade and one paragon in those games. And then trying to bring that into a more just simply into a bigger audience, into a console, into the console generation. And then that becomes, unfortunately, the kind of new standard for what morality play was for a lot of the 2000s and 2010s.
And I remember all that time too, because I remember when BioShock came out, and how many people were pissed that you had no inventory. They were like, I don't want to just immediately eat or drink everything. I want to store it in my inventory. And me, I didn't care because I never played System Shock or anything. And by the time I went back to try and play System Shock 2, every key on the keyboard had a unique function. And I was like, this is why controllers are a good thing. Because this is unreasonable. But
you got all those keys, one to an action.
Yeah. I'm going to be curious how mechanical changes and systematic changes gets disseminated as we go forward, because y'all were talking about the jump from 2D to 3D for a lot of games, and this jump of the morality system from something more diverse to something more binary that's easily trackable. What I see a lot of times is mechanical limitations on the dev becoming a limitation upon the audience. And then there's this negative feedback loop of it's like, okay, well, we're going from 2D to 3D, it's going to be slower, so the audience expects something slower, and so the money men are like, well, we want that thing, and then it becomes this negative feedback loop. Whereas nowadays, I feel that generally there's enough processing power that if you have an idea to futz with whatever particular sacred cow of today, there's enough space for you to figure out how to do it. So I'm going to be interested in how quickly these feedback loops get reinforced or dissipated as we go into the future. Because, 3D games used to be, like Ocarina of Time, like slow, and then you have things like DMC or Nirvana where it's just nothing but fast. Yeah, and then it's people get tired of fast, and so they start to go slower. Dark Souls, and then people get tired of Dark Souls. We're moving back into more action games nowadays. Yeah,
Souls likes are getting faster. Yeah,
and even the slow games are getting faster.
And that's the thing too, because you talk to a lot of people, and I think that's the question too of like what is complexity and what is simplicity? Because talking to people about something like Dark Souls, and there's an element where Dark Souls' mechanics are technically simple enough, or at least the combat mechanics are simple enough. It doesn't take much to really understand and grok what you got to do. But Where you can get into some of that complexity ends up being the character build, the RPG elements, and that's the kind of stuff that I suck at. But then you give me, and this is the funny thing too, because as you were talking and you mentioned Devil May Cry, I actually thought of the more subtle comparison between just something like DMC, Devil May Cry by Ninja Theory, and then something like, Devil May Cry 4 or 5, where DMC is technically more simple in that they made things like, all right, do you want to do well against this enemy? Then use this element, right? Or use this element of weapon, or use this element. It's not as combo focused. It's something simple like that. But when you get down to the buttons you got to memorize and you got to figure out, those are actually more complex than a basic Devil May Cry control scheme. So they simplified the concept of what you got to do, but then they complicated the actual control scheme to do it. And
yeah, the application of it.
And and this is the same even when we look at Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread has it's funny, I was talking to our buddy Grim about this, but I was distracted and not really thinking well, because he prefers like where you have the missile, then you have the super missile. They're two separate things, right? And you gotta, and like in Metroid Prime, where you gotta swap between the different beams. But that creates that sort of situational complexity. But in the moment, it's different, because with Metroid Dread, I think it's better for the speed of the combat that you get the missile, and then the super missile overrides the missile. And then the multi-missile overrides the super missile. So that when you're in this quick combat, you've got so many different abilities tied to each button, and then you have button combinations that do different things, that it's better to have that quick combat where all your complexity is focused on what button do I press, right? And it becomes muscle memory, because otherwise... But that's the thing, like it's you end up having different complexity based on like what complexity are you as a player more suited for? Are you better with the different button combinations that are complex, or are you better with the different options available? Like, do you want a hotkey bar like in an MMO or something like that? Like, which degree of complexity is best suited to you? And I tell you what, I am awful with character builds. I loved experimenting in my last run of Elden Ring. I loved trying different things, but the fact that I got to endgame and I feel like it's kicking my butt, I think with Elden Ring you can tell if someone is better at that reflex mechanical button combination versus character build by how they feel about that end game, because I suck at character builds, but man, do I love a lot of that reflex stuff.
I mean, it's kind of like in Night Rain when players you can tell are either good at the run, like choosing where to go and what to pick up at what speed, or they're actually just better at the mechanical combat, because you could run into people that do both, and they get all the way to the end boss at level 15. They're like, man, I'm ready to go, and they've got everything laid out, but then their actual ability to fight the boss is mediocre, and they lose simply on a matter of skill.
Why are you going to call me out as sucking at both? No.
Because you keep losing runs.
Yeah. I still haven't beaten Night Rain. Oh my goodness.
Oh dearie.
But no, that also fits though, because again, like you look at DMC Devil May Cry, that's kind of one of those perfect examples where it's not even a sequel; it is meant to be a reboot, and if you were to divorce it from its original property, it would be a fine game that just has a really garbage story, right? But because it's Devil May Cry, it's viewed as being an absolute trash fire of a game.
That's a big part of it, is what the audience expects from a certain franchise.
The name. So
you put the name on it, they expect a certain level of whatever has come before it, and whatever they expect the next thing to be of it. So you not only have to meet and match, you have to exceed expectations. And if you want to experiment, if you want to reboot in a series that hasn't really had that before, you have a steep hill to climb, and you might fall off like that game did.
And usually, like, there's a big difference you can see between games where when they reboot, it's because they had like a firm idea of something new they wanted to try, and games where they went, I mean, that sounds hard though. Let's just make a game we're familiar with and put this IP on top of it. where it doesn't really respect the intentions of the original or have its own like unique vision. It's just like, what if it was more familiar to other players that didn't, play the original, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something that did that recently because I know there's at least I know something did something like that.
I mean, I was thinking of like Splinter Cell Blacklist, right, where it's like not really a stealth game or nearly as much anyway.
It's more of a third-person
versus
shooter
the original.
kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's almost more of an action thing from what I understood about the like the slow-mo stuff going on.
You know what? Part of that too is also that was post Gears of War, and remember when everyone suddenly went from being a first-person shooter to a cover shooter, everybody needed cover mechanics, and that was the worst part of LA Noire, man.
Unfortunately accurate way I've ever heard that described. It was from someone that worked at the Coalition, and he was like one of the designers, and he's like, yeah, this is horizontal platforming on the cover base, and I was like, God, he's right.
He stole that from Dark Void's marketing. Nobody remembers Dark Void, and that's the hilarious thing.
Funny.
Dark Void was like, yeah, you got a jetpack, so you could do cover-based shooting going upwards, and it's like,
yeah,
but you can't tell. Oh my goodness, that's a game. That's an awful game. I gotta replay just to revisit an awful game. I guess there's also then the question because in my mind now that I think about it, the Assassin's Creed series is also a curious one because again, like they kind of reinvented themselves with Origins, but a lot of people weren't happy with that. But at the same time, it's like Valhalla is like their best-selling one. It's also the most profitable because yes, people will buy those stupid shortcuts. So no wonder.
No
wonder the executive said that gamers love this.
Valhalla made $1 billion. Exactly. People have to remember that.
But it's like they decided we're going to take Assassin's Creed and then imitate The Witcher. But then my understanding of Shadows, because then they've released Mirage, which is supposed to be more like the original games. But then Shadows is evidently confused in that it's trying to be both. And it's like we're now seeing a series that pushed so hard to release annually has then tried to reinvent itself into a different annual format. And now it's like trying to figure out what exactly its identity is.
And there's almost multiple paths branching off of it, right?
And if we go full circle, how many of these games share any staff whatsoever?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was a big part of the when all the muckraking was picking up for Shadows. One of the big moments I remember is it was a higher up at Ubisoft saying that basically we have no one that has released a game on the Shadows team. It's just like, huh?
Oh, no.
It's just like, damn. It's just nothing but newbies trying to, come in and trying to figure it out and pick up a legacy. It's like, whoo, you got a challenge.
They can have worked at the company, especially if it's at Ubisoft. They could have been years and years and years before they released the game. I mean, the last game I worked on.
That's a fair point.
Far Cry 6 Year 2. So that was quite a while ago.
Goodness gracious.
And Ubisoft has so many studios around the world. It's honestly, it'd be probably worth me looking into it a little bit more just to understand the sheer level of logistics that Ubisoft has to deal with, because that sounds ridiculous.
It's very hard, and their siloing happens. It's very easy with multiple teams to have like a missive posted to one of them that doesn't get to the other one in time, or like have departments that don't talk to each other well enough. And I don't know how you really solve that. Like, it's a factor of having so many people. There's like upkeep that you have to pay as you expand a team from like 100 to 200 or whatever. That's like exponential. Sure, you can make stuff faster, and you can go wide with like what you're making. You can make a huge world, and not have it take like three or four times longer if it's 3 or 4 times as big. On the other hand, all little details are pretty much constantly fought over, and everything else slows down. It's like there's an upkeep cost to it.
It's one of the reasons that I wonder, because you have more and more different developers will leave these big AAA publishers, and they'll form a new studio, and they'll say things like the ideal studio size to me is 50 people. And I'm like, do you mean
Yeah, I
50
agree with that.
people, including HR, including accounting and payroll? Like, does that include the executives too? Like,
I would never include the extra company around it. I would say the dev team making the video game, anyone involved in the creative process, it can only be this big. The other ones are like supporting staff. Probably doesn't matter as much. Like, yeah, you need some people to help out, but like, I think when they say that, they're more talking about how diffused like an idea can be across multiple people, and how a game made by like 400 people lacks the character of a game made by like 50 people. Because 50 people have like they can get more through by asking fewer people things, and more of their personality comes out in the game.
Because this is just
and then that seems to be a big part of just keeping people interested and up to date, is that they get to put their own little stamp on it. Whatever goofy idea they have, if they can find a way to finagle it in there, that helps add character to the final product.
A little doggy house that says Doog on it.
with the dangling boxing gloves.
Well, we've gone a little bit again, digress again, because if we're going back then to the topic of sequels, and I guess I think the hardest part is juggling with audience expectations, because we already mentioned a few franchises, right? But you have Resident Evil as a perfect example, where for some people everything went downhill once 4 was released, and then for other people 4 was great, but it never measured up after that. And now we probably have people that never played a Resident Evil until 7. And that's like their...
Or even the remakes. I think you could say plenty have only played 4 remake at this point.
Yeah, they never played the original 4. They never played the original 2. So they hopped on with Resident Evil 2.
So there's like 5 or 6 different identities that the franchise could have at this point.
And it's funny because I remember when I was in high school having a theory at the time that the first Final Fantasy you played was your favorite. Now, this is a theory more based off of other people I spoke with, because my first Final Fantasy was the first one on the NES.
Right.
You are old.
Does it still apply? Is your favorite one?
Yes, I am old. My favorite at the time was kind of every new release at that point. Like, okay, Final Fantasy 4. Oh man, I love Final Fantasy 2 at the time. Final Fantasy 6 is the best one, and then Final Fantasy 7 came out, and ultimately the original 7 did become my favorite. But then 8 happened, and 8 is where I started to like, okay, something's different, something's wrong here. But a lot of people loved 8, and at the same time, even Final Fantasy, like, what was the Final Fantasy franchise identity? Because in the United States, you got the first one, you got the 4th one, you got the 6th one, and then you got the 7th one. And all of these games were very similar in their gameplay style. We never got Final Fantasy 2, where the whole level up system was completely upended.
Right.
We never got Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 5, which each had the job system. So,
I mean, if you were on PC,
I see what you mean.
7, and then you got 8, and then you didn't get 9, and then you didn't get 10, and you went, why?
And then Eidos was using incomplete source code because they didn't even get to finish.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yes, the PC releases of those games, but that
is fascinating to think about. That the more experimental level up systems in 2 or in 5 with the jobs didn't get translated into the Western market until far later, so it ends up creating a more conservative viewpoint of what a Final Fantasy battle system can be. That's really interesting. The weird decisions made in history that change everything.
Yep.
Butterfly effects.
Final Fantasy VIII was one of those experimental systems, and it felt completely awful. Well, to me at least.
Well, all right.
I hate the junction system, but
8 was my first. I still have a soft spot for it. Though Tactics is my favorite.
Yes.
I played 7 first, and I still think 8's cool in the same way I think Dark Souls 2 is cool. And I know that's going to just get the mob riled up, but
you really ought to join Rada's
Discord to figure out how to make the junctions work, because junctions, there's a lot of interesting ideas there. And the music is fucking fire.
The biggest problem with junctions, and it's like the summon system as well. Like, I found basically the best way to get through that game was to never cast spells and to never summon monsters, because summons just took way too long. mash your finger.
I love mashing that button. Number go up. The most obvious way.
But that's the thing. It's like, all right, I'm going to junction all my most powerful spells to my attack, my hit points and stuff. I'm going to just attack the enemy to death. It's a boss fight.
Yep.
Maybe I'll have some kind of spell I could use as a backup for like boosting my characters, but usually just nope, attack, and just annihilate. Like,
if the enemies you killed dropped the spells that they contained, that would be so much better.
Also part
or
of it,
or you have the different games nowadays where they will replenish your HP automatically after a fight, or you have like a certain, like a Clair Obscure does this, where you have healing items but they replenish every fight.
Dude,
something like that I think could work into it.
Again, Clair Obscure is one of those fascinating ways of combining genres, because they basically just give you an Estus flask.
Yeah.
But because of its implementation, you don't think of it necessarily as an Estus flask. It's so fascinating.
They realized that like making the player farm up stuff to buy potions, to have potions in combat, probably wasn't the most balanced or fun way to do that. It took a long time though, because we're still doing it.
And if you sacrifice the attrition factor, you can up the severity of consequences in each individual fight.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is also, like, again, if we're talking about complex game. Here's an example that almost no one will know about, which is the Caligula Effect games, 1 and 2. And those have a very fascinating combat system that they never leaned into. But that's one of those where, you know, your hit points are restored after the battle. Like, your hit points, magic points, whatever, are just for that one battle. And as a result, you can go into some really difficult random challenges and feel really engaged by that battle, because it's not the, as you said, attrition of a classic Final Fantasy or like Bravely Default even doing it, where it's like, all right, I'm going to use the same old strategy against this trash mob and just avoid using too much magic so that I don't have to use too many ethers. So the
best example of attrition is any SMT game.
I was going to say Etrian Odyssey, maybe?
Etrian's another one. But that's interesting because it's complex at all times. That game is made to beat your ass down.
You know what I haven't seen in a really long time that could come back and be super cool, I think? We have durability systems a lot, but we don't have salvage systems that made sense in the same way that like Interstate 76 or MechWarrior did, where you've got a gun off of like a defeated enemy and you went, yeah, there's my gun. But then if that part of yours got damaged, the gun went with it. So your gun was then destroyed and you had to loot another one off a defeated enemy to replace the one that was destroyed. It had like a salvager mindset kind of thing going on.
Yeah, you have structural considerations to make. If you lose your arm, you lose your weapon. I would like that, because I recently started playing a little bit with survival games, and that's kind of the situation. It's like if you build a house on a stilt, the stilt goes down, you lose your house.
Right.
I think there's enough mechanical overlap that you could start reintroducing that. That would be fun.
Yeah, so
you build your mech like you're building a structure. Oh,
right.
Ooh, this is fun.
Yeah, see? Mech building games. It's the only one out there is MechWarrior 5 now, and it's just, you know, it's the mechanics of older MechWarrior brought back, right? But no one else is doing it.
Armored Core, but most mech builders are just like Harumphet AC6 right now.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. No, and it's funny because when you mentioned that, though, my mind went to Halo Combat Evolved, but that's another one of those where it's that sort of like consolification of a genre, because they gave you the 2-weapon limit, but at the same time, you didn't exactly have ammo everywhere, at least not for Covenant weapons. Human weapons, they dropped ammo everywhere they could, and I think that's to the game's detriment. Because Halo, where it really
in certain parts, yeah, I agree. The famine mentality and the constant adaptability of the Master Chief to keep swapping to new weapons and know how to use each one in each particular case. That's an interesting focus.
You never have enough Magnum ammo for anything, even though the Magnum's great.
Well, with Halo at the same time, especially the first one, I think it's also one of those things where it's because it wasn't until Legendary where human ammo runs out so fast because the human weapons are so insignificant to the Covenant
Yeah,
shields.
everyone gets so much more powerful.
Yeah, that's when you discover, oh wait, Covenant weapons are so much better against Covenant.
Right.
They
And that-
fucked up the plasma pistol after one,
God,
and
no.
I still do not forgive them for it. God,
You
I
know
love
what?
Just the
OG plasma pistol.
or just the normal
Well,
pistol too.
Yeah, well, yeah, the regular pistol too they destroyed, but the semi-automatic fire, I got
Yeah.
so good at fanning that
Oh
trigger.
yeah,
God.
yeah. You think it's an automatic weapon. I've done that too.
Oh man, I love that shit.
It's like you just find a little car door and you just kill everything coming down. It's like, oh look,
And there's so many plasma pistols. Everybody had one. Every little grunt was packing a plasma
exactly.
pistol.
There's so many.
And they could wreck house.
Yep.
On Legendary. Oh my god.
Especially because that's the thing you learn from the Covenant because they wrecked you with it. It's like, how are you
all those
firing
little
that
shits
fast?
have all those little shits have binary triggers or something, man. It was nuts.
But that's the thing. That's another perfect example because then Halo 2, you're right, they wreck the balancing on the weapons. And part of it's because they want to introduce this new feature. We really want you to do the 2-weapon combination. Only there's too many disadvantages of the 2-weapon combination, right? Because you're locked to those 2 weapons. So you can get but because it's 2 weapons, all right, you're locked to these 2 weapons, and it kind of gives you that 1-2 punch you could do in the first game. Only now, because you can pack 2 weapons at any time, they're weaker.
Or half as strong. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all weaker, so you can't do as much damage. So Halo 2 had that issue going for it.
This kind of leads me into an idea I was thinking about, how much balance and how that changes in between each title can change the feel and the feeling of the audience towards a specific game. And so this kind of leads me to an interesting kind of like meta situation of like meta sequels, and that's live service games. So the thing that keeps coming to mind talking about all this is Helldivers 2 and how it's originally the shotgun had X amount of rounds, and then they changed the amount of rounds. Flamethrower can shoot around walls or things like that, and then they changed that to not shoot through walls. And especially with how players interact with live service and MMOs, things like that, over time, and how the balance can change over that time, and fan feedback to those things. It's basically these games are their own sequels at multiple points in time, depending upon how the player base and the developers feel about each particular game. And it's interesting when it's in this gigantic, this long snake of a process, rather than you have succinct, concrete iterations.
If you look at something like Warframe, that's been around for forever, actual eternity, it's more of a Jenga tower of like, we've just added new things on top and left the old things as they were until we want to go back maybe and take a piece out.
Gosh, yeah, it's like Persona 3's Tartarus. It's just a whole bunch of random shit clonked onto each other.
I was going to say Ship of Theseus, like we said earlier, but I was like, no, that's the wrong metaphor. This is more like the superstructure from Blame, where it just keeps building outwards forever. So
they just kept
placement
parts ships on.
The old parts stay put, and just more ships appear attached to the original.
So I know there's like some kind of a sci-fi movie or something where like somebody jumps forward in time, and this little itty bitty robot that they had like just has so much stuff added to it that it's now this big hulking thing that you barely see the original. It's like either an anime or it's a movie. I can't remember what it is, but it's like I have this image in my head of this idea, this very idea you're talking about. But no, and Helldivers is actually doubly interesting because again, Helldivers 2, and how many people never even played Helldivers 1, which was a top-down shooter game, right? So you already had this small indie team managed to get bigger, and they could take their property from this kind of a limited game to a bigger game, more grandiose.
Well, how crazy was it? They went from being top-down third-person to a third-person shooter, and that's all it took, with basically this very similar gameplay mechanics to become like a smash hit for everybody forever.
Well,
Yeah,
not forever, clearly.
it hit such a sweet spot, and then we ended up in these multiple, not even skirmishes, it's all out warfare between the devs and the audience.
Right.
And as it stands, from what I understand, the audience has won pretty fucking soundly in
Right.
what they desire from the game. And that's a general trend that I've been seeing overall. There's almost like this like populist call for what the audience wants, and it's either go with it or drown, especially
Right.
nowadays with so many games out there. Me personally, that's something I'm trying to get my head around. I'm not quite sure if I like it, because I like games that challenge me and go in different directions than I particularly like. It's just a matter of how much am I gelling with the experiment
for
at any
Helldivers 2,
particular point.
For Helldivers 2, I think part of, from what I saw, for the most part, the audience argument against the developers was also what the audience fell in love with at the beginning, and the developers and the audience wanting to basically keep, the players, the players wanting to keep that essence of what was so good at the start going, and the developers, anytime they would have coursed away from that, it's like the players course corrected them back. And this is also like your core audience is also spending money, and it's not whales necessarily. It's your core audience of players that are still playing, that are keeping your engagement numbers up, and are willing to occasionally throw some money at you or something.
Yeah, sometimes, and they like certain weapons and certain playstyles. They didn't really want to see them become worse, even though sometimes, even if like some things are overpowered and after the change might still be okay, but they're always contentious whenever there's like a nerf to something that's beloved.
Because then I'm thinking of like, you get Diablo Immortal though, and Diablo Immortal you can just whale yourself to success, and there's definitely, because for these live service games they want to put in microtransactions, they want to keep going, and there's a balancing act there because you need to make sure that money is worth being spent, and yet you don't want to give people something that's going to break the game. And make it unfair. Even if it's PvE, pay to win still sucks. But then you have, because now I think of Destiny, and one of the big things about
that's
Destiny,
another one.
Destiny was the opposite. Destiny
kept need a sequel.
Firstly, it didn't need a sequel, but that was, I will concede, that was part of what was clearly Activision's desire. Activision clearly wanted to have a new entry every couple of years because they didn't understand what they had at the time.
Well, yeah, I was to say that at the time, and really kind of still, there's this idea that like games as a service games, you'll put one out and it'll make infinite money and sustain it by itself, and that's never true. But like that's the assumption. But then they come out, and dev teams seem to have this idea that, well, okay, we've made it now. Let's start working on the sequel, even though it's a game as a service game with a 10-year plan. And I was like, what are you doing? The service is here. The game is here. Work on the game that you've made, and then keep the service.
Making expansions. Keep making new content, new chapters.
I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but it felt for all the world like they were making a Destiny 3 for like 3 or 4 years there, and it was content starving the main game until at some point someone was like, stop doing that. Work on Destiny 2, and the Destiny 2 suddenly got a big rush of new content.
It's more accurate to say that Bungie started working on another game, and then they started working on marathons. So it's more that over time, fewer and fewer people were working on Destiny. And all the meanwhile, and this is true, like going back to Destiny 1, there would be there would be like glitches or other issues that would be harmful to the player experience. Players would be like, guys, patch this.
Yeah.
That's not what. That's the thing, though. That's an exploit that players liked, and they were quick.
The loot cave, because they were too stingy with drops everywhere else.
Well, okay, but that also exposed what I felt about Destiny, which was that they think they're smarter than the players, and they can just mess with the random number stuff on the assumption that players will go, yeah, it's just random, but it's never random. It's always weighted. It's always like, finagle in the background. And I was like, this game is just cheating. It's like going to a casino and you realize that like everything is kind of a scam, but this is like even more scammy than normal. This is like playing you from the outset.
But
Yeah, and sorry, developers, you're never going to beat the gestalt of
Yeah, they're
the
going to figure it
hordes
out.
out there. Oh my god!
But they had this,
people are so
this
smart.
assumption, right? This like self-concern. Well, yeah, but we can just make it that way, and the players will never work it out.
But the thing is, even regardless of that, what I mean is that was the first exploit players found that they were quick to patch out. But from
Right.
Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, there'd be these lingering, long-lasting issues and bugs that players would run into, and they'd be like, sorry, we don't have the resources to patch that. But any single exploit, every exploit the players found was patched within a week. And that's where you have to question, okay, what is Bungie's real interest here? What are they really trying to do? Because, and as the years went on, and they finally released their final chapter, and it arrived with a wet fart. Like, you finally concluded this big story you'd been doing, and, firstly, so much of your audience had already checked out. They were like, I don't even care anymore.
I've probably sunk 800 hours into both games, and I haven't even bothered to look it up. That's how little I care about it at this point.
And that's the thing. And what people
What a
did
waste of a
stick
good
around,
gameplay loop.
what people did stick
Jeez,
around,
no joke.
and that's and it was good game mechanics, if anything. What a good.
Can you imagine if they just made it like the next Halo game or something, with the same feedback, the same weapons, the same general vibe?
It would have to be different weapons.
If they
but
just went old school and did just a simple campaign, 8 hours of all of that time and effort, it just shoved into that. Oh my god, it would break numbers, man.
Heck, at the very least, do it like a Left 4 Dead style, because I like those boss fights. Give it like a horde shooter design where you have set levels with maybe like AI director crap, and then actually Remnant.
Yeah.
Do it like Remnant 2.
I mean,
Halo Remnant could be great.
Yeah,
I like the raids. The raids were World of Warcraft raids back from the dead. Like,
That
I
is
hadn't
true.
seen like that anywhere else, and I was like, it's impressive that they allow this complex for raid mechanics to exist in this game, because it's out of nowhere and it's not like it's a popular thing.
but
Only
that's
like
the thing. If you
the
look
raiding population are going to do this.
if you look at how Remnant is this, well, especially the boss fights, Remnant 2 has those MMO style boss fights. It has those raid style boss fights. And that's the thing, like, you take the Destiny mechanics and you give it the Remnant structure, then you actually have a really good multiplayer game.
If you could somehow build into it, because Remnant 2 raid mechanics are like an eighth of what Destiny was getting away with at certain points.
With the actual raid.
If you could find a way to build up into that level of complexity, and to get 6 sweaty lone wolves to sit there and work together,
I'd max it at
is a
4.
fucking accomplishment.
Admittedly, I'd max it at 4.
Yeah.
Even though everybody does 3 now. Everything caps at 3 now.
I mean, what other game can you think of where you walk into a boss arena and there's like symbols floating in the air to this side? There's like a machine on the right that has a bunch of interactions. There's like 6 levers. You're like, what do those do? And then there's like an outpost further back that has some sort of, big glowing button on it. And then everyone's just like, I guess we'll just die until we figure it out.
Yeah.
They spend like 3 hours failing at the boss fight, wondering why like the orbital cannon is blasting them on the 20th minute of the fight, right?
Or you get your Sherpa. You get your Sherpa that is going to like help the new people, and you actually have community engagement. But then they screwed it up with Destiny 2's very first raid, because it was so stupidly. And oh my goodness! And you needed someone that was actually good at the mechanics. You needed all 6 people to be good enough at like the ring around the track too.
Right.
And our group did not have 6 people that were able to do that platforming.
Even the raid that I did the most time with, we never did the final fight correctly.
Oh gosh!
Every time we did an exploit.
Oh my goodness!
And but to go from like the first time I was doing it, it was something like 10, 11 hours over 2 days. To the final time I did it, I think the group I was with, we did it within 40 minutes. That's fucking amazing.
Actually, though, but you're kind of right too, because again, just Destiny 1 alone, right? What is it, King's Fall, was it? Or was that later on?
Is that the Oryx DLC?
The first big, the Fallen expansion.
The Fallen King, I think.
Fallen King, that's what it was, or something like that. It was, no, not Fallen King. Oh, God, I can't remember.
That.
The Taken King.
Taken King, that's what it was. That itself, you're right though. It's like because if Destiny 1 is the first game, Taken King is like the sequel that comes in and like delivers on the promise of what Destiny could be. Because everybody loved Taken King. Everybody loved the raid for Taken King. Like all that stuff. Like Taken King was the realization of what Destiny could be. Rise of Iron was this weird filler in between, and then Destiny 2 was the Halo 4, where it's just all screwed up.
But then you had Forspoken, which I guess would be
Okay.
to keep it going, is the Infinite, where it's like they got some of it back.
They got some of it back. It was okay. The story was completely at that point.
The story is goofballs.
I knew the story was gone for me because I hated the fallen enemies. The guy talked like Cookie Monster half the time. It was terrible.
Yeah.
But that's again though, to go back to your original point though, like these, you're right. Like these live service games end up being sequels among themselves, unless we get into the only successful real live service system to work, the gacha live service system. Because it is live service, but what I've been finding is like now that I'm finally into one, the game doesn't change much.
You just get new content for the game.
Yeah, Girls Frontline 2, at least in particular, you just get new content. All the stories are visual novel cutscenes. Granted, Girls Frontline 2 is its own story because they're actively changing the canon as they bring stuff from the Chinese server to the English server.
Like really? Okay.
Yeah, they're rewriting
they're like
stuff.
they're retconning.
They're retconning.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
They're retconning stuff because there was so much.
That's always dangerous. People like being able to pull back on what they know of a franchise to be like, oh, ooh, I know that thing. They want to whistle and point at the screen. They don't want to be told you're wrong.
Allegedly, we're in a sort of like situation where Hideo Kojima tried to work on something else, and then he came back for Metal Gear Solid 2 because they just could not make a Metal Gear Solid without him. We have that kind of a situation where the Yu Zhong evidently kind of went off to do something else. Other people were writing Girls Frontline 2.
He was working on Reverse Collapse.
He was working on, well, hopefully. Everybody hated the writing in Girls Frontline 2. So he came back, and he's now retconning it to make it more like Girls Frontline 1, which everybody loves because the story is like...
interesting.
Now, granted, it's still not quite there. At this point, the Girls Frontline 2 story is far and away inferior to what Girls Frontline 1 was able to do.
Is that why it seemed... I haven't actually played it myself yet, but there have been people talking about how it hasn't dropped a new story update in a long time.
Sort of. You can tell how they're chaining together a bunch of filler arcs to try and make it like that. But like their last event, the first half of the event was like poolside filler arc garbage, and then the latter half of the event is suddenly going into this sci-fi cyberpunk identity, what happens when someone can actively rewrite and erase your brain kind of a thing, like Ghost in the Shell. And it's like, we're so back, baby, we're actually doing it. Speculative science fiction. And now all of a sudden it's like, all right, and we're back to like filler arc where we got like this, we got this new big titted character that everybody's going to want to roll for. And we're selling her costume where she's wearing basically a nothing apron. And it's like, oh, come on, guys. We were so back.
The duality of man.
It is literally, we're so back, it's so over. We're like...
The duality of android.
Exactly. But that's the thing. Like, it's still, when you look into things like, now we have Uma Musume, right? Another...
Did they even have a new game, or was that just released here and then everybody started playing it?
It was just released in English and everyone's playing it. So that's not a one that's been out for a few years. But it's
Can we get that for Grand Blue, please? It's been years.
But that's the thing. Like, you have these... and you have Genshin Impact. You have MiHoYo has like 5 games that they're doing this with. But it's like the gacha mechanic is what's keeping these different anime-based Asian live service games alive. And it's funny that a lot of people differentiate them. They're like, oh, it's a gacha game, it's a live service game. It's like they're the same thing. It's just how they like what they center that monetary model on is different. And it turns out gacha centers it purely around hot characters.
Pretty much. Well, some like Arc Knights where it's like balanced differently and it's more cool characters. Generally, like not entirely for sure, but the balance is a lot more in the direction of like, here's a cool looking character, here's like they have outfits that are different sets of clothes from different places, rather than all just being, you know, waifu bait stuff. Not to say it's not like 70% female or something, right?
Actually, that's the funny thing, because Infinity Nikki is the one that completely screwed themselves over somehow. I don't know what their first major update was, but like my YouTube exploded with this is how you kill your game, because just whatever their first update was that undid a bunch of the good stuff from the very launch, just people dropped it. But then you also have following the Play Asia Discord. There's a VTuber there that is a young Gen Z woman that is very much into the gacha. So I find out about stuff like the Reverse 1999. And that's more, that's got a larger female dynamic. Why? Well, you look at the characters, and it's very much about fashion. It's Victorian era. You have characters that are all very wonderfully dressed. And it gives more of an aesthetic and a vibe that's going to be different from a lot of the obvious Gooner bait stuff. But even Uma Musume, you look at the characters aren't really Gooner bait in Uma Musume, but they still look good, and it's got the gameplay mechanics. So
yeah, it's the same model. It's just what are you appealing to? Is it aesthetics? So sorry, what kind of aesthetics are you appealing to?
But again,
it's always aesthetics though.
These are also designed though. It's like they're designed with the mechanics in a limited scope to be like, what can we deliver in a tight, regular schedule? Like, what can we deliver every 10 weeks? And that's actually probably even less than that. For like, because again, like I'm getting updates in Girls Frontline every 4 weeks, but then every major event is maybe every few months. But it's like, what can we do that we can systematically push this content out, and therefore you're not going to be making a lot of major changes. It's not going to be, and I think that's one of the interesting areas where you look at.
I do enjoy this little game when like that those things come out and you realize that there's multiple teams that work on different ones, and they're probably the same people. So you try to link like different events together, and okay, this is probably the same person that wrote this one, but not this one. Not that you'll ever know for sure, probably, but it is cool to think about.
I could see that. You also definitely have like Girls Frontline has mini games on rotation. So it's like, okay, this update we get the survivors mode, which I love. It's like then we have the Goddess of Victory Nikkei booty shooting mode mini game.
Right.
But now all of a sudden we have some crappy non-rhythm game, and then we have this catch the item dropping from the sky Mario Party mini game. So like you have different teams working on different things that'll then have a revised update sometime later. So,
that kind of sounds like fun.
But it really, what I'm hearing is essentially a Call of Duty style rotation.
Yeah,
basically. But within a single studio and within a single game.
Right. You know, honestly, more games that do live service that aren't gacha should do this. Not the gacha part. Please don't do that.
I think I agree. It's having something almost. This sounds a little bit more negative than I intended to be, but it's almost like a factory mechanical, and more importantly, it sounds assembly line. But the important part of all that is it's a steady feed of content, which is what
live service
the audience wants and what the creators need in order to keep the servers and all of it running.
It's the daily special, right? It's on the menu. We have the one, sort of cordoned off bit. This is the daily special. You're going to see one of these at a time, once every month or once every 2 weeks or something, and you'll play that. And the ones that people like a lot are going to join the main game content flow at some point.
I actually really like that as an example. That's a great example. I need to keep that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll pitch that to somebody in the future, I hope, because that's I'd like not only that is also how we prototype mechanics in the industry. There's often a run of we'll do a bunch of prototypes of things, just come up with whatever you think is cool with these mechanics, and we'll make little demos of them that are just proofs of concept, and we'll see how we feel about them. And the ones that do really well end up sort of reinserted back into missions and future content. So they could just do that and then have this vehicle for those ideas, rather than having to try and like scrape for ways to cram it into the main gameplay loop, which might already be kind of ossified, right? Like it's already been developed.
Mm-hmm.
There may not be space for them if they're out there.
I can't stress how much I love that analogy, because I'm the old school who is like, fuck this, I'm not giving you money every week. But turning it into the idea of, it's like a restaurant and they're always trying something new. And for me personally, that's something I can more gravitate to, because that's something I do I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere. All I got is one restaurant. And so it's for me personally, this works perfectly, but for me, it works well for within the last 3 years of my life in that context.
Right.
And so I think that's an important idea to bring forward for bringing new ideas or getting new audiences or old audiences to go along with whatever the creator's trying to do now.
By pure coincidence, finding the next style of gameplay that comes along, because this is where like Battle Royale came from, right? This is where we got like survival extraction modes and things like that, like from Tarkov. It's just someone tried an idea, they went, hey, that actually works pretty well, and then everybody else kind of took it from that point. But you only get that by experimenting in the first place and finding like something worked better than you thought and actually gels well with something, and then someone else goes, hey, what if I combined that idea with like a different gameplay loop, and you end up with the whole genre popping up out of nowhere.
I mean, it's
and then you have the scenario where Call of Duty looks at what PUBG and Fortnite are doing and says, let's put that into our thing, and now that's another pillar. It was such a pillar. What was it, Black Ops 4? It was basically just that.
Right.
One of those games
where
it was
Warzone?
Like it was only the multiplayer and Warzone is what that game came with. It's that fucking important to like it's only that in Madden that have been around the longest in terms of like Western game series.
No, okay, so going back to when you were talking about like the pitching, and that's how you get a lot of these ideas like the PUBG and stuff. That's also how Valve kind of made their bank before Steam, because when they released Half-Life, people started buying the crap out of Half-Life, and they were just like, hey, we'll hire you. And that's how you get Counter-Strike. That's how you get Blue Shift. That's how you get Enemy
Left 4 Dead and Portal.
Left 4 Dead, Portal. Right. Portal started not as a mod. That was something different. They saw the Narbacular drop game.
Well, they had built a discerning eye at that point for them to be like, I want that. I will buy that. I will help you to make that.
But originally it was just a whole bunch of people making mods of Half-Life, and they're like, all right, here, let's grab that. And we'll make a retail release of it. Let's wrap up. We did digress a lot, loosey-goosey, but honestly, it was a good conversation. I like talking about a lot of the stuff we discussed. But it actually does beg a question at the end, which is, what even sequels do kind of look like when you have all this live service stuff going on. And I'm curious what the future of live service is, because again, from the Western perspective, the only ones that were really working were like Warframe and Destiny, and Destiny's completely collapsed, and Warframe
they're the old heads.
Warframe is stable, but you haven't really seen anybody come in with a successful new live service yet.
I mean, Warframe is so successful that it held the studio together for my entire career, actually, because I was going to go work, or rather, I sent a resume there when they were working on Dark Sector, before Warframe even came out.
Oh, wow.
I was at the convention where they pitched Dark Sector.
Oh, my goodness.
They work in London, Ontario, so I was actually in London, Ontario for the first time when they did that. And I remember thinking, when it came out, there's no publicity around this thing. Like, did it even release? And I felt bad for them.
If you then played the game, if you played the game, you'd be like, "This is not at all what they pitched.
Right?
This is completely different."
Right, and then they pivoted to Warframe, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There you go. That's one where it's like the company rebooted their own thing to be more what they wanted it to be. Oh
Absolutely. And then it ended up becoming, it'll be online, it'll be a ninja game, whatever. And then suddenly that caught on, and they were able to sustain whatever team they need that makes that content pretty much indefinitely, which is extra crazy because their plan for making Warframe still isn't a plan as far as I can tell. It seems to just be, well, that's cool, let's put it in. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. How about mechs? Sure. How about flying? Let's do it. How about space combat? You
How
know,
about 1999?
what even is, yeah, exactly. What about a dating minigame? What about dogs? It's like, whatever this needs to be, it'll be it.
Yeah, and I think the most important question there is why not? Because it's their game. They get to make it for their audience, and they don't have someone above them telling them what to do or not to do. They just have to be in a dialogue with the audience.
Yeah, with
and
the
for
audience.
Me, I think going forward, that's what I'm most hopeful for. I will be disappointed many times along the way, but that's what I'm most hopeful for as we go forward with so much of the ossified major publishers crumbling and faltering, is that we have more opportunities for devs to talk to who's important, which is their customers. And what I'm most excited for is more sequels that both sides, the two important sides of this conversation, can go forward with each other with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and less sequels that only exist to have the same IP name on them.
Yeah, get rid of the middleman. We're not interested in keeping the IP. Fuck that shit. Let's do something fun.
I mean, at the very least, I can also say let's go back to like an older class of marketing executive. Like you can find interviews in the 80s of Hollywood where they would reject scripts that sounded too much like a movie that already existed. Which is funny because this is also from the era where people said it's Die Hard, but but also, again, like I just read Reggie Fils-Aimé's Changing the Game. Interesting book, not quite what I expected, but the thing that's clear is he was a business and marketing guy that always made sure to understand the market and the customer, and he was looking, his big thing is disruption, right? But I don't think you always have to disrupt, but you do have to know what your consumer wants and what your consumer perceives as value. And I think that's the biggest issue we have, is we have a lot of people that have business degrees, fancy business degrees or fancy business doctorates, but they don't actually understand business. They understand,
they have a
like,
theoretical understanding.
Yeah, they have this theoretical understanding, but they think that you can just apply a formula and a template to anything and make it work. And that's why you have Sony failing and now panicking over, we're going to make 12 live service games and now half of them are canceled.
How many billion-dollar mistakes and wastes of time and disappointments and all kinds of other bad things could have been avoided if in the room with the executives they simply had a regular guy that played some video games to turn to and say, what do you think?
I think that's a dumb idea. Don't do it.
I think ACG calls it's every group needs a Tim to sit in the corner and be like, no.
That's dumb. Honestly, my favorite director I've ever worked with, the thing he said the most was, that's dumb, which sounds like a horrible human, but actually it was always to things that were dumb. And I went, you know what? He's right. No one else had the guts to say it.
Well, I aspire to be that guy.
And he never got a promotion.
Well, he was bigwig already.
Okay.
I don't know if he got there saying that that's dumb, but he certainly reached an apex pinnacle of that's dumb.
All right. But thank you guys for joining, and thanks everyone for listening in. I'll catch you all another time. Bye.
All right. Later.
Cheers.